There's this frame that like, oh, Biden bowed out gracefully, and that's not what happened here. Joe Biden was pushed out of this race by the Democratic Party and by leaders of the Democratic Party. It has surprised me how quickly every leader of the Democratic Party has endorsed Kamala Harris. Top Democrats had signaled publicly and privately that they prefer to have at least some sort of a competition rather than a coronation. And really the story that people should be paying attention to the next month is Kamala Harris is not just going to let the Biden campaign run as it was before, but she also doesn't want to change it enough that it falls to the ground.
I'm Bob Safian. I'm here with Alex Thompson, national political correspondent for Axios. Alex, thanks for joining us.
So good to be here.
So, wild last 24 hours or so. It's Monday evening, and we are really not sure exactly what's going to happen with the Democratic nominee. Although you knew all this was coming, right? How did you find out?
I found out sitting right where I'm at right now, working in the afternoon. I was tempted to go see a movie and go wild with my social life by doing so by myself.
Wild, yes.
Yeah, I was going to go see Twisters. I was very excited for it. And I was like, yeah, I got some stuff too. The way I thought about it is that my head said that he was going to drop out, but my heart just didn't think he was, just because I didn't know how he was going to get there psychologically. Joe Biden's, if you would call it a superpower, is sort of his resilience. And the fact that when he's knocked down, he like keeps going. I also think he really believed he was the most likable person against Donald Trump, even as the rest of the party and lots of his friends were saying otherwise. And I was a little bit surprised, that he would sort of just say, cry uncle after Nancy Pelosi really was saying it's time for you to go.
Yeah, no, I have to say that from the moment I was watching that debate, I thought like, this guy's got to go. And yet this morning I woke up and I was a little bit like sad for him and for his family a little bit, like emotionally, as you say, like it's a hard thing to turn away from.
There's a lot of sadness and anger among people that have worked for Joe Biden in the past, people that weren't around, this last 6 months, people that, a lot of these people gave up a lot of the prime of their lives, working for this man, whether or not it was in the Senate or the vice presidency. And I think the reason it's both sadness and anger is because, they obviously are sad that it's over. They're sad that it's over in this way, where you have an incumbent president basically giving up power 4 months beforehand because a significant part of the population no longer believes he is capable. But I think that the anger really comes from a place of, how did the people that spent time with him frequently let him get on the debate stage? This was not the first time he had acted that way. And why did the people that were spending time with him every single day, which was a small crew, let him get on that debate stage and get to this point?
This news comes yesterday afternoon. It's now Monday evening. In the time since then, I mean, it's been kind of crazy. What's unfolded as you expected, and what surprised you?
It has surprised me how quickly every leader of the Democratic Party has endorsed Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi and several other top Democrats had signaled publicly and privately that they prefer to have at least some sort of a competition rather than a coronation. At least as of this taping, Kamala Harris has appeared to mostly wrap this nomination up within, 30 hours.
Yeah.
Did surprise me. I thought that, given her performance in the 2020 campaign and given sort of some of the unevenness of her vice presidency, plus, I can tell you, like, Joe Biden as senior team, their concerns about her. And despite what I just said, I'm not totally surprised that Joe Biden endorsed her. Like, take the politics out of it. like think about Joe Biden as a person, loyalty is the highest virtue in Biden world, which is also part of the reason why, he was offended by his perception that he was more loyal to Obama than Obama was to him, and was offended by what he saw as Obama preferring Hillary to him in 2016. So, I don't think it's knowing Joe Biden is not so surprising that he endorsed Kamala Harris, but I guess I was surprised that the rest of the party went along so fast.
Yeah, the parlor game that began almost immediately yesterday afternoon of like what might happen and who might it be, and the whole idea of a more open convention, all that, it's like that's trying to be squashed down really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. The Democratic Party has made clear they want, after what truly was a agonizing 3.5 weeks for the party. They just want to have a nominee and just have this news cycle from hell be over. The thing that's, again, surprising is, we haven't really heard from Harris in a while. I mean, most of her events are very tightly controlled. They're friendly environments on friendly issues. We really haven't seen her do a tough interview for a while. And what happens if in like a week or two, she finally does a big sit down and she's a mess? Then I think there might be some buyer's remorse, but also maybe like there's not that much time to election day, and Democrats want to get on with organizing and trying to beat Trump. And in which case, having this very fast coronation makes a lot of sense.
How much leeway was there with like the money that was there for Biden, the delegates that were posted by? I mean, did those automatically revert to her, or was there actually more flexibility? Is there still flexibility?
There definitely was flexibility. I think if Joe Biden had not explicitly endorsed her, this would be a very different thing. And you saw some prominent Democrats resist the momentum. Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries all did not endorse her yesterday.
Right.
That was intentional to see how this would play out.
It was like a waterfall today,
Yes, exactly. The money thing is complicated because the DNC has $100+ million cash on hand, and that can be used for any Democratic nominee. The Biden-Harris team also has $100 million ish in hard money. And some lawyers argue, while Biden's dropped out because Harris is on the ticket, she can use it as Harris for president. And there are some people, it's a minority opinion that says like, no, you actually can't do that. And there are some people that say like, it doesn't matter if it's Harris or the nominee, you can actually transfer that money to the DNC anyway. This is the first election cycle between the Trump trials and Hunter's trials where my mom was finally correct in suggesting I go to law school.
As a show that focuses on business, one of the things that we've been reflecting on is the sort of the level of attention paid to business leaders' positions on candidates. Like one of the early New York Times stories yesterday highlighted that LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman had endorsed Harris. Reid hosts a sister podcast to this one. Like, since when did the billionaire class, count as an endorsement? In the same way that a political leader would?
It is sort of strange. I mean, some of this is the post-Citizens United world where one billionaire can have such a huge effect. You have, I think, Elon Musk last week, the Wall Street Journal reported, would do $40+ million in a super PAC backing Trump. And you have these people of immense wealth being able to fuel tens of millions of dollars of campaign, and that means it's worthy of tracking them. I think it is this strange dynamic that we just increasingly just accept as normal, but maybe is a bit off.
And so whether it's Silicon Valley folks, Elon Musk or Reid or even Jamie Dimon, like, you really think it's all about the money. It's not necessarily that there's other influence because, it matters what business leaders think?
I think there's probably some of that, in the same way that, how many voters really care that Sherrod Brown endorsed Kamala Harris?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but Sherrod Brown is like an influential figure among a certain group of people, and it's a signal to them, and like it's a powerful group of people. And Sherrod Brown's senator of Ohio, if people don't know, and like I think Reid Hoffman's sort of the same, where he is a signal to other people in his sort of influential group, and that is why it is important. That being said, some of it I think just has to do with the money.
On this show, when we talk about startups, we sometimes use this analogy of, how startups are like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down. And it seems like that's kind of what this Democratic campaign is forced to do, even though the Democratic Party is not historically an agile, fast-moving operation. Do you have a sense about how yet the party is trying to build the plane in this moment?
Yeah, I'd say the metaphor is a bit tweaked in this scenario, because you did have a plane that was flying. Now you could argue it wasn't flying very well, but like the Biden for president reelection campaign, it was airborne, right? Like there was
right.
And then basically the debate turned into multiple engine failure, like steep dive, and now they're in a situation where maybe they've leveled out, but still like an engine or two is out. So that, I guess, to continue the metaphor way too long, is that they are trying to fix the campaign while they are airborne and very close to the ground. And that is what Kamala Harris and her team is going to try to do. And really the story that people should be paying attention to the next month is Kamala Harris is not just going to let the Biden campaign run as it was before, but she also doesn't want to change it enough that it falls to the ground. How are the ways that she changes the campaign was operating? Who does she install that she trusts? But also, how does she do it in a way that does not necessarily create sort of a free fall?
Was one of the advantages, or I guess disadvantages, of someone other than Kamala Harris that you would have to build a whole new plane if there were some other ticket?
Yes, and you're exactly right that it comes with advantages and disadvantages, especially given we are now 4 months before Election Day. And this is why, Joe Biden's debate basically left the Democratic Party with no good options. You could keep Joe Biden the ticket. That's like not a great option. You could replace him with Vice President Kamala Harris, who had sort of an unsteady record, but would inherit the plane, as rickety as it was. Or you could try to open up the process and let new people build their own plane. But the problem is they only have 4 months to do so. And, Donald Trump declared for president, 20 months ago, and has a 20-month head start in building his own plane.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I was a little surprised because and maybe this is just the storyteller or the media person in me, that as painful as the media story has been for the Democrats over the last 3.5 weeks, keeping the suspense of who would be on the ticket, that's a great story, and you get a lot of attention, and you sort of take up a lot of air that keeps, that attention away from Trump and the Republicans.
Yeah, there was definitely an argument I heard from Democratic operatives, including operatives close to potential, presidential candidates, that believed an open convention, as chaotic as it would actually be the least bad option of the bad options available, for this reason, is that you would grab eyeballs, attention, and you'd bring energy right to a party that really needed it. As chaotic as the campaign might end up being, it would be just like this adrenaline shot.
Listen, if there's anything Trump has taught us, right, it's that getting attention is an art form that works, and
I think the thesis of Trump's life is that all attention is good attention.
You had a scoop early today about, that Biden sort of initially didn't think Kamala Harris could win. Was that in part because he didn't feel like she could generate that attention? Like, do you have a sense about why he had that concern about her?
Yeah, I think there's three parts to it. One is his own ego, right,
Mm,
where he had sort of convinced himself that he was the indispensable man. Um, the second part is that they're just very different people and very different generations, and I
mm,
don't think, in some ways, Biden didn't completely appreciate her skills. You know, in because his skills are so about like being a politician from Delaware. It's all about how many hands can you shake, because you can basically shake everyone's hand in the state. And then the most uncharitable explanation towards Kamala Harris is that, you know, Biden was just really not wowed by her performance the last 3.5 years. And
hmm
there was this feeling that she churned through staff to an incredible extent. I can give you like one stat. So, about half of the vice president's staff is paid through the Senate, and that requires staff disclosure. So we don't have the full staff, but we have a significant portion of it. The 47 people that were on her Senate staff disclosure at the beginning of her term, of those 47, only 5 are still there.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and, and I even compared, DC is a churning place. So
Yeah.
like I compared it to Vice President Biden's first term, same period of time of the Obama administration's first term. Of the 38 people that started with Joe Biden at the beginning of the Obama term, 17 were still there at the same period of time. So this is an abnormal level of churn
Hmm.
and staff turnover the vice president has. She also, at times, with regards to migration and other issues, the White House felt that she walked away from responsibility rather than embraced it.
Hmm.
And was not always a team player as she was looking out for her political future. Kamala Harris's team at times felt that the White House was almost intentionally not trying to give her clear wins. And again, this is from the Harris side. They never had evidence, but it was a feeling that the
Hmm.
White House didn't want her to be seen as like a clear alternative going into a reelection where there were some doubts about Biden.
Hmm. And yet he chose to endorse her despite all of those
And
things.
yet he chose to endorse her. I think the thing to remember is like there's this frame that like, oh, Biden bowed out gracefully, and that's not what happened here. Joe Biden did not want to bow out of this race. I think
Mm.
just listen to every single appearance he's had the last 4 weeks since the debate. Joe Biden was pushed out of this race by the Democratic Party and by leaders of the Democratic Party. And then once he decided, okay, I'm getting out of this race, then he basically just has a decision. Do I endorse Kamala or not?
Yeah.
And based on what we talked about with this loyalty code, I think he basically said, I prefer to endorse Harris rather than not.
We still have a long road to go before there's much clarity, and there's so much noise right now. So much feels like it's changing and it's unstable and it's unknown. And as we see just over the last 30 hours, what do you hold on to as firm in this moment about where the party is and where the election is overall? Or can you not? Do you just need to be like reactive and attentive and see where it all goes?
That's a great question. If you are any candidate in this race, you want to be Donald Trump right now. The fact of the matter is that this is probably the strongest position Donald Trump has been in his entire short political career.
Hmm.
The Republican Party is more united behind him than ever. He is also not in the midst of a once in a century pandemic. And there is a world in which we think back where, even though Trump was dealing with COVID, he only lost by 45,000 votes across 3 states. There's also a world in which, the country, just after the sort of dual traumas of COVID and what happened with the economy, is much more risk averse. They're not happy with the status quo, but they're actually much more risk averse. That they're wary of change, at least the sort of change Trump is promising. Even though like most both candidates are not talking about COVID at all. I think COVID is sort of this quiet factor in how people are deciding.
It's really interesting that the Democratic Party doesn't have a real cohesive story of the future that's different than the present, right? They're just riding on like, here's where we are right now. Let's just keep in this lane. You know?
Well, and that's the risk of picking Kamala Harris as your nominee, is that she is not distinct from the current administration. She is inextricably tied to this administration. And you've already seen that the first ad from the Trump super PAC was very focused on basically saying she is Joe Biden. And I think, the Democratic Party, especially elites in the Democratic Party, after the debate, have convinced themselves that all the problems that they have are only tied to Joe Biden's age and not to their record. And the Trump campaign is saying, no, like, there's also problems with your record. And we will see how the Democratic Party responds to that and how voters respond to that. And we honestly don't know.
Yeah. Well, Alex, very thoughtful of you to join us, and I hope we'll keep this conversation going. It's a crazy, crazy time to know what to do and what to think. Thanks for helping clear it up a little bit, as much as we can, for our listeners.
So fun to be on.